Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to the King's Report for Wednesday, May 8th, 2019. We're in the 10th year of Chungi, and this is the 4th month and the 4th day by the heavenly calendar. Tim Miller is sitting in for the second king of Hyungjin Moon. Let's go right to the weather. It's, let's see, the temperature right now is 51 degrees in the Cheongguk area, and we're expecting to get to a high of 68 today and be partly sunny. There was some rain during the night, but I think it is pretty much clearing up now. And then, the sun is rising. It just arose just a couple minutes ago. It's a light outside now. And the rest of the week, we'll be having a cooler day tomorrow, 58. It will be the high tomorrow, but then getting back to 69 on Friday with a shower and thunderstorms around. And then on Saturday, 65 with periods of rain. Sunday, it looks like occasional rain and cooler, going down to 52 for a daytime high. Today, the temperature is 68, but the real feel will be 75, so it's going to be a rather humid and warm day, but the chance of a rain is only 4% now. And tonight going down to 43, also a 4% chance of rain, so very little chance of rain. All right, and this is right on the nose of the historical average. See, the historical average for today is 67 and 43, so we're exactly there. Sun is rising today, or it rose today at, where'd it go? Here we go, 5:48. Wow, so it's already been up for about 15 minutes or so. And the sun's setting tonight after 8 o'clock at 8:03 p.m. for 14 hours and 15 minutes of daylight. All right, let's go to our Rima today. And in our Rima today, I'm in the First Kings, chapter 1, starting at verse 28. And this is the section where Solomon is anointed as the king to succeed David. Then King David answered and said, "Call me Bathsheba." And she came into the king's presence and stood before the king. And the king sware and said, "As the Lord liveth, that hath redeemed my soul out of all distress, even as I swear unto thee by the Lord God of Israel, saying, Assuredly, Solomon thy son shall reign after me, and he shall sit upon my throne in my stead. Even so will I certainly do this day." Then Bathsheba bowed her with her head to the earth and did reverence to the king. In other words, she did a kyungbe, right, head to the earth, and did reverence to the king, and said, "Let my Lord King David live forever." And King David said, "Call me Zadok and the priest, and Nathan the prophet, and Benaiah the son of Jehoiada." And they came before the king. The king also said unto them, "Take with you the servants of your Lord, and cause Solomon my son to ride upon mine own mule, and bring him down to Gihon. And let Zadok the priest and Nathan the prophet anoint him there king over Israel. And blow ye with the trumpet, and say, God save King Solomon. Then ye shall come up after him, that he may come and sit upon my throne, for he shall be king in my stead, and I have appointed him to be the ruler over Israel and over Judah." And Benaiah and the son of Jehoiada answered the king and said, "Amen, amen, for the Lord God of my Lord, the king, say so too." All right, so that's the story of Solomon being anointed a king by David. Of course, this happened because Adonijah was trying to usurp the throne. Adonijah was another son of David, the fourth son, actually, I think, of David, according to what I see in Wikipedia. And he was gathering his own, creating his own power base, gathering people and feeding them and having some feast and so forth and so on, and going around telling people, "I'm the king." But Bathsheba knew that David had already told her that her son Solomon was going to be king. And so she was very disturbed by this. And so she went to Solomon and said, "You know what? We got a problem here." And actually it was Nathan the prophet that actually went to David and said, "There's a problem." And so then David said, "Okay, well, I've got to do something about this right now. Always, when there's a succession in any sort of a power structure, the time of succession is the weakest time, because there are a lot of people in the power structure and in the kingdom or in the country or wherever who think that the guy going out, the outgoing person, was really great, and the new guy is never going to fill his shoes. And besides, I think someone else should be king, or I should be king. So there's it takes some time for things to settle. And I know why God gave me this rhema this morning, because yesterday I was at the deposition of Gihon Kim, the continental director of the Family Federation. And of course, a lot of the deposition was, I can't talk about the substance of the deposition, but the expected questions that you can imagine, and a lot of their nonsense was put out, and so forth, and so. But always there is this time of uncertainty, shall we say, of when things can go wrong in a time of succession. Someone else tries to come in and tries to steal the crown, steal the throne, or someone comes in and says, "Oh no, this new guy, he's not qualified. I know the last king anointed him, but when he anointed him, he didn't know what he was doing." This kind of thing. But we need to really hold fast to what Father has told us and what He has taught us. David is the sort of the king that seen as kind of the high point, I guess, or the origin or the high point of Jewish history, and even now, Jews hope for the restoration of the Davidic kingdom. And so he was kind of even though there was Saul before him, but Saul really didn't have he was fighting all the time and really didn't have the opportunity to really act like a king, to have a palace or anything like that. So David was really the first king, shall we say, of Israel. And then the second generation, Solomon, was being anointed. And of course, there'd be opposition there, because David, according to what I saw on Wikipedia, had at least 21 sons, 19 whose names appear in the Hebrew Bible, and 2 others who died without being named. So you can imagine among those 19, at least among those 19, there was a lot of stuff going on, a lot of stuff going on. And there was a little bit of a difficulty in getting Solomon anointed. And we're in a similar kind of difficulty where there are, people who don't recognize the second king as king, who want someone else to be king, who want the Han mother to continue in her reign. It's really unfortunate what happened to her. And I'm going to talk about it more when I'm free to talk about her deposition. I attended her deposition as well, and she made some very interesting statements, which I think allow us to help us to understand what's been going on. But I really can't. Anyway, that's something for the future. Something for the future. All right. So anyway, time of uncertainty is the time of a transition, but we need to overcome that uncertainty and help the king to be established. And here too, if David had just been left alone, and someone didn't stand up and say, "Hey, wait a second, Adonijah is trying to usurp the throne. David, what are you going to do about it?" Then if no one had done that, then Adonijah's coup would have succeeded. Because because here in verses 1 through 20 or so, at 20 or so, there's this coup d'etat going on. And Bathsheba goes and tells him, and also Nathan the prophet also talks about it. And Nathan asks, David, did you tell Adonijah that he's going to be the next king? This kind of thing. And David said, no, I did not, definitely did not. And so, so they get Solomon anointed there quickly, and then the people who were supporting Adonijah suddenly all come over to Solomon. Yeah. All right, well, that's the Bible Rima this morning. And for my Rima here in the Cheonsongyong, again, I'm going to just translate this, and I'm going to try and find it in the English Cheonsongyong. But I'm in the book on True Families, True Family, and chapter 1, in the very beginning of chapter 1. So the very beginning of the book on family. And this talks about, what is God's will. In the Lord's Prayer, Jesus taught us to pray saying, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Thy will be done. But what is God's will? And what does it mean, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven? How is it that God's will has been done in heaven? Before I joined the Unification Church, I was a Christian. But if someone were to ask me, what is God's will? I would not have been able to answer. And even, I think, for a long time after joining the Unification Church, if someone said, what is God's will? What do you think God's will is? I couldn't answer. But it's actually very simple. And Father explains it very well right here. He says, and I'm translating here, many people talk about God's will. This word seems very simple, but if you ask actually what is God's will, then it's very difficult to answer. And also, until this day, many people of faith have prayed for God's will to be done. And they have, we are now leading lives of faith for the accomplishment of God's will. But we are praying for God's will to be done without really knowing what that will is, and we are leading our life of faith for the will of God without knowing what that will is. And so this is a contradiction, Father says. And then in the next paragraph, he says, the will of God as seen by the Unification Church. In other words, the will of God as known by Reverend Moon. Now, isn't this interesting? Anyway, we'll get into that just a bit. What is that? That is that God's ideal of creation by which he created this universe. In other words, that the purpose of creation be completed. That is the will of God. Yeah. So more concretely then, what is the will of God? Well, we know what is the purpose of creation. Well, of course, it's to return, joy and joy. But the purpose of creation is, in a word, the four-position foundation is God wanted to create the four-position foundation, the family of the four-position foundation, centering on God. In other words, to have a family, husband, wife, children, centering on God. That is the purpose of creation, and that is the will of God. So when Jesus prayed, "Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven," he was praying for the for God's purpose of creation to be accomplished. And this is something that Father brings to us that Christianity, I think, often misses or ignores. Not that they don't know it, but that they just ignore, because their theology in most cases, begins with Jesus, begins with the cross, perhaps ends with the cross as well. But Father's theology does not begin with the cross. It actually begins in the Garden of Eden. It begins with the creation, And so because he begins with the creation, then he can ask, well, why did God create? What was the purpose of that creation? And then from that, it follows very clearly, then, okay, well, then God's will must be then to complete that purpose of creation, because until now, it has not been completed. Well, now it has been, because we have in spirit world, here, these two people behind me, we have Father and we have Mother in spirit world. And so now, after 6,000 biblical years, that purpose of creation has been completed in the presence of true parents in heaven, and then in the presence of their heir and representative of their substantial body on earth. So now, God's will has been done. God's will has been done. And that is a fantastic statement that we can make now. Yes, of course, there's still a lot of mopping up operation that needs to be done, but the first, in a knot, you always have to find the first end, right, at the end there, in order to start to untangle it. And that has been found, that's been established. Well, I remember, I'm sure many people remember in the 1980s when Father would be in Belvedere, and also in the 70s. One of the things he would do is he would boast how quickly he could untangle a knot. And he was actually quite gifted in untangling knots. A piece of string or rope or something like that was all knotted up and untangled, and Father would just pull a few, something here, and it would all come untangled. Because he had this amazing ability to untangle things. Yes, and now Father's couple has been established. Father and Mother have been established in spirit world, and that's the first step, or that's the first sort of the end that you find in order to start untangling the knot. So the rest is just just up to us, of course, but for us then to establish God's will in our own families. All right. So and in the true family. So I read a recent, or I saw a video actually recently on YouTube about how the Amish population in America is growing, and they have a very high birth rate and also retention rate in their religion, that's because they have lots of babies, and those babies grow up to have families of their own. Not homosexual families, not transgender families, but actual heterosexual monogamous families. And we are challenged to do the same thing. We need to create lots and lots and lots of blessed families, and then those blessed families need to have lots and lots and lots of children. Yeah. Today we're going to have a blessing here at the Sanctuary Church. Very wonderful day. Shina Moon is being blessed. The granddaughter of true parents is being blessed to Mike Seeberger. And this is a very wonderful and historic occasion. And we pray that many, many blessings will come to them. They seem to be, two of them seem to be very, very happy. So may they have many children. I guess we can pray for that. Yeah. All right. That's my Rima for this morning. Let's see. So today I'm on my computer here, so I'll have to use my phone here to look at the news of the day. Of course, the big news, I guess that, or at least that a lot of outlets are covering this morning, is that the New York Times got a hold of some of President Trump's not tax returns themselves, but they got a hold of some of the numbers that are in the tax returns. That's very interesting. So looking at the actual New York Times article, it says that someone who had legal access to the tax returns or to the information, or at least to the information in the tax returns, got them and provided these to the New York Times. Someone who had legal access, well, I suppose that narrows down the field, I suppose. Anyway, I'll read this article. I'm reading it from the Seattle Times, which is actually reprinting the New York Times article. The New York Times and Washington Post, and I think also LA Times, maybe Chicago Tribune, they have a network of local papers around the country that they provide news to for a fee, of course. And New York Times is the New York Times News Service. And so this article is carried in the New York Times this morning, but also they put it on their news service so that it is published in many, many other newspapers around the country. So I happen to be reading this from the Seattle Times. Let's see. It says here, decade in the red, Trump tax figures show over $1 billion in business losses. Now remember, this is 1985 to 1994 is what they're talking about. So these are, if they are true, if they are accurate, and we don't know that they are, but if they are accurate, they're talking about something that's about 30 years old. But anyway, there's been such a fuss over the tax returns that I guess they're happy to get these to get this information. And by the way, the New York Times has not been able to completely verify the accuracy of these numbers, as you will see, but still they're going to assume that they are accurate. Let's see, by the time his Master of the Universe memoir, Trump, The Art of the Deal, hit bookstores in 1987, Donald Trump was already in deep financial distress, losing tens of millions of dollars on troubled business deals, according to previously unrevealed figures from his federal income tax returns. So they're not talking about the returns themselves. The New York Times has not actually seen Trump's returns. They're seeing figures from the returns given to them by someone else. Trump was propelled to the presidency in part by a self-spun narrative of business success and of setbacks triumphantly overcome. He has attributed his first run of reversals and bankruptcies to the recession that took hold in 1990, but 10 years of tax information obtained by the New York Times paints a different and far bleaker picture of his deal-making abilities and financial condition. Well, that's their interpretation. Yeah. And we'll see in a minute that there can be another interpretation. The data printouts from Trump's official Internal Revenue Service tax transcripts with the figures from his federal tax form, the 1040, for the years 1985 to 1994, represents the fullest and most detailed look to date at the president's taxes, information he has kept from public view. Though the information does not cover the tax years at the center of an escalating battle between Trump administration and Congress. In other words, Congress right now is trying to get Trump to release the tax returns for the most recent 6 years. And New York Times is talking about something that was 30 years ago. So anyway, though the information does not cover the tax years at the center of an escalating battle between the Trump administration and Congress, it traces the most tumultuous chapter in a long business career, an era of fevered acquisition and spectacular collapse. The numbers show that in 1985, Trump reported losses of $46.1 million from his core businesses, largely casinos, hotels, and retail space in apartment buildings. They continued to lose money every year, totaling $1.17 billion in losses for the decade. In fact, year after year, Trump appears to have lost more money than nearly any other individual American taxpayer. The Times found when it compared his results with the detailed information, the IRS detailed information see more than double those in years taxpayer and IRS information for those years. Overall, Trump lost so much money that he was able to avoid paying income taxes for 8 of the 10 years. It is not known whether the IRS later required changes after audits. So these returns too, they may have been audited. Times doesn't know that. So there's a lot of so it's kind of a soft thing, but still Times is running with it. So anyway, that's the New York Times take on this, and then we see, and of course, a lot of channels and news outlets are picking up this story. Everybody's excited. Let's see here, but let's see. Breitbart has a story here about what the Times left out, about what they didn't report. Get that up here. Breitbart.com says here that the New York Times Trump tax story leaves out New York City real estate crash. Donald Trump must have breathed a sigh of relief as 1995 drew to a close. The epic crash of New York City real estate, which had battered Trump's investments and left many fellow real estate investors clinging to any lifeline of solvency, was finally over. Prices of New York City real estate, which had fallen in each of the previous 5 years, had finally started to rise. Apartment rental prices fell by 15% during the slump that had begun in 1988. The prices of co-ops and condos, which were down by nearly twice that much. Manhattan homes fell by 32.9% between 89 and 98, according to a study by the Furman Center for Real Estate and Urban Policy. In Chelsea and Hell's Kitchen, that West Side stretch where Trump had invested so much in a plan to turn an old rail yard into a new neighborhood, home prices fell 40.4%. The giant Canadian real estate companies Olympia and York had declared bankruptcy. At one point, it had been the largest landlord in New York. By 1992, it had fired its bankers from J.P. Morgan and hired Felix G. Rohatyn, the guy who had saved New York City itself from the brink of bankruptcy in the 1970s. In the end, it would be swallowed up by its creditors, vanishing into the ash heap of history. Banks were getting crushed. New Jersey's largest savings association was seized by federal regulators after real estate losses. Wall Street was scrambling, with real estate king Goldman Sachs suddenly finding it could not raise money from investors for real estate projects. Even Goldman, which was dominated by businesses on Wall Street, is telling many of its real estate bankers to look for new jobs, a news story noted in 1991. Trump had made it through the worst period in New York City real estate in living memory, while bigger, deeper-pocketed rivals had failed, a sigh of relief at least. Yet, according to the New York Times story, detailing glimpses at Trump's finances from, quote, tax transcripts, unquote, of his filings from 85 to 94, Trump's personal financial losses during the New York City real estate crisis somehow marked him as a failure rather than as someone who persevered through an economic story. Well, of course, yeah, as the New York Times does not want to paint Trump in a favorable light, no matter how good the information may be. They simply must not give him any credit for anything. So then they quote from the story, which we just read from the New York Times. And so anyway, yeah, so this also goes on to detail some of what is in the New York Times story. So that is what's going on this morning with the tax returns. And President Trump, I'm not really sure why he's refusing to publish his or release his returns, but he has the right to do that. And just because other presidents have released their returns doesn't mean that he has to. It's up to the American people to say, okay, am I going to vote for this man even though he doesn't release his tax returns? I mean, that's one of the things that we take into consideration when we go out to vote for him. Certainly I voted for him. It was not a big thing to me that he was not releasing his returns. I think the tax returns thing is a big deal, mostly, almost completely, I think, for people who are already determined not to vote for Trump. And so I don't think it's going to affect the 2020 election. But it's, the Mueller report failed, the congressional investigations have failed. The New York City district attorney, they're putting some hope on her, but she's not really making much progress. So they got to have some straw, they're grabbing at straws here, and Democrats have to, and the establishment Republicans have to have some straw to grab onto, and this is their newest thing, all right? So they will talk about this for a while, and then it will go away. I can tell you that. But they are, in the meantime, desperate to find something that will help them to bring down President Trump. But you know what? He's really doing great things. That is their problem. That is their problem. Yeah. And I want to go to right now. I think the most important thing is what's going on with China. This is a crucial week in the trade situation with China, as I mentioned yesterday, I think. And yes, and here this is a story this is LMT Online, and I was carrying this story about what's going on with China now. President Trump's aggressive trade policies are running headlong into his campaign for re-election. As Trump prepares to run on the economy, his threat to increase tariffs on imports from China has sent the stock market diving and served to undercut a stretch of positive economic news. U.S. farmers and exporters, already bearing the brunt of China's retaliatory tariffs, now face the prospect of an escalating trade war in which key states that Trump needs to win re-election will be in the crosshairs. Well, we'll see. We'll see what happens. Again, this story is trying to paint it in a negative light, but I don't think we need to see it that way. I think China has basically they basically, I think, kowtowed already. They said that they might not send anyone to Washington to participate in the trade talks this week, ahead of the Friday deadline, 12:01 a.m. Friday deadline. But then they gave in. They've already blinked. And they have already indicated that they are in a weaker position. So I think I think the trade talks are going to go well, and I expect that we will have an announcement, and President Trump will not have to impose those tariffs. At least that's what I'm expecting. And once again, President Trump's ability to deal with foreign tyrants will have been demonstrated. Until now, he's dealt with Kim Jong-un, he's dealt with the tyrants of Iran, he's dealt with Xi Jinping, and especially dealing with Xi Jinping. I think he's done a really excellent job. Yeah, very excellent job. Yeah. All right, yesterday there was an unfortunate incident in Colorado, in a Colorado school, which, of course, because it's a school, I assume it is a gun-free zone, and yet someone brought a gun. Says as deputies ran inside the STEM school Highlands Ranch, they could hear shots being fired. Two suspects had made their way deep inside the suburban Denver school and begun shooting inside two separate classrooms, Douglas County Sheriff Tony Spurlock said. The 18-year-old male student was killed and 8 students were injured in the attack, which began just before 2 p.m. on Tuesday. Authorities said the school notified police almost immediately, and the first sheriff's deputies responded and engaged with the suspects just 2 minutes after being alerted. The officers struggled to take the suspects, both believed to be students, into custody, Spurlock said. The sheriff has said one suspect is an adult male and one is believed to be a juvenile. Devon Erickson, 18, was identified by the sheriff's office as one of the suspects. The department said in a tweet that it will not release photos at this time to maintain the integrity of the investigation. We will have interviews to conduct, and we want to make sure we have the most accurate information, the sheriff's office said. Spurlock said authorities can only say at this point that a handgun was used. One mother of twins told CNN affiliate KDVR she received a call from her daughter. Mommy, there's a gun shot at my school. She told the network, her daughter said. With everything at Columbine, the mother who was not identified told the affiliate, you never think this would be the reality of this situation. In a message to parents, Spurlock said, police will do everything we can to investigate this and determine what happened, etc., etc. All right, so again, at a gun-free zone, a school that is a gun-free zone, there was a gun, and police responded in 2 minutes, but in those 2 minutes, 2 people were killed. Unfortunately, there was no one on the scene at the time to deal with the situation with their tools. Florida came to their senses. Florida passed a law, signed into law by the governor. It was passed by both the houses of the legislature, allowing teachers to be armed if the school district chooses to do so. So Florida is waking up. Florida is waking up, and some districts can choose to do that and other districts not. And then parents can decide which is the safer school to which to send their children. Parents can decide that. They can move into one district or another district. When you buy houses, one of the factors that many people consider is the school district, the quality of the school district. I think in the future, people will be looking at the policy of the school district with regard to arming teachers. Will they allow their teachers to be armed? Will they allow certain trained teachers to have their firearms on them, and so that if something occurs, that there's a much higher possibility that it can be dealt with not in minutes, but in seconds. Not in minutes, but in seconds. When seconds count, the police are only minutes away. And even CNN is trying its best to destroy America's gun culture, to undermine the Second Amendment, has to admit that it took the police 2 minutes to respond. That sounds like a very short time, doesn't it? But in that short time, 2 people died, and many others, several others were injured. Yeah. Whereas if there was someone there at that time, perhaps those 2 people could have been saved. Perhaps they would still be alive today. A few days ago, we had this story about how there was a shooting on the East Coast. Where was it? Anyway, one of the students tackled the shooter and stopped the shooting, but he was killed he himself was killed in the process. And the media really plays him up as a hero. And yeah, that was a very brave thing to do. He is a hero. But these same media, if he had had a gun, and if he had shot the shooter, and he put down the shooter without being killed himself, probably would be criticizing him. They're only praising him because he died. I think that's very nasty and hypocritical and cynical of the media. We need to let the good people live and let the bad people die, not the other way around. All right. Yeah. Let's see what else is going on this morning. As long as we're on, I thought I was on Breitbart, but I'm not. Okay. Well, Breitbart 2 is carrying the tax returns at the top of its page. Let's see what else is on. Drudge here. No sex pleas, digital life to blame for lack of lovemaking? Question mark. Baltimore computer system crippled by ransomware virus. Residents not able to pay bills. Okay. All right. And star comes for whiny Mueller. Paper Comey in trouble and knows it. And in shock poll, 57% of Democrats believe Trump guilty of treason. They shouldn't believe their own propaganda so much. Pelosi says Russia case is not closed. And Wall Street Journal says a pseudo impeachment. Is this something that we can take a look at? Let's see. Sometimes Wall Street Journal doesn't let you read more than the first few lines. Let's see. House Democrats are escalating their campaign against the Trump administration with complaints that its resistance to congressional requests for documents is a threat to democracy. Oh, we say, no, come on. The real threat to democracy is the Democratic Party. They are trying to establish a one-party state. That's the threat to democracy. It's more accurate to say the Democrats are performing what amounts to a pseudo-impeachment so they don't have to undertake a real one. The Democrats are agonizing over impeachment because while they're itching to do it, Special Counsel Robert Mueller's report blew up their Russian collusion hopes. He also took no position on obstruction of justice while reporting a highly critical analysis of President Trump's actions. Democrats now find themselves caught between a left-wing base that says they'll abdicate their duty if they don't impeach, and Speaker Nancy Pelosi's cold-blooded calculation that it would cost their majority in 2020. What to do? Democrats have decided to act out a pseudo-impeachment that claims Mr. Trump and his administration are committing offenses against the Constitution without daring to open a formal impeachment inquiry. The split-level goal is to appease the left while sparing the swing district Democrats who delivered the 2018 majority from ever having to vote on articles of impeachment. The problem with this play acting is that it has Democrats fulminating about actions that aren't even misdemeanors, much less high crimes. Exhibit A is Judiciary Chairman Gerald Nadler's threat to hold Attorney General William Barr in contempt for failing to turn over entire Mueller report to Congress. Yet Mr. Barr has been as accommodating as the law allows. He made the entire report public with light redactions, though he didn't have to release any of it under the law. He has let senior members of Congress review redacted material in private, though no Democrats have taken him up on the offer. The exception is grand jury information that Mr. Barr can't release without a judge order if relevant to specific legal investigations. A judge isn't supposed to open such a testimony to members of Congress for general oversight, though it might get it as part of a formal impeachment proceeding. How is Mr. Barr obstructing Congress by providing access to nearly all of the Mueller report and 99.9% of the section of obstruction of justice? Mr. Nadler is threatening to sue Mr. Barr to get the rest, but will go out on a limb and predict he has no chance of winning in court. Even if a liberal judge agrees, the decision will be overturned on appeal. These executive Congress disputes are typically settled by negotiation, and on Tuesday, judiciary staffers of both parties met with representatives from Justice to discuss the accommodation. We're told Justice offered to allow a dozen or more staffers to review the less redacted report and take and keep notes and allow those who have viewed the report to in camera to discuss it with one another. The question is whether this will be enough. So anyway, the journal goes on in that vein. Yeah, pseudo impeachment. Isn't that nice? They can basically have their cake and eat it too. They can accuse President Trump and sort of give him the political damage they hope of that would be somewhat similar to what would happen if he were impeached. But they don't actually have to vote on impeachment. So individual congressional members will not have their vote on record with regard to impeaching President Trump. Well, we'll see. I hope the Democratic base pushes harder for impeachment, because I think that would be very good for President Trump. It will help to unite the country around President Trump. It will help to unite his base, certainly. So I hope that Ocasio-Cortez and others will try harder to get Pelosi to impeach President Trump, or to initiate impeachment proceedings. That would be a tremendous boost for President Trump's 2020 campaign. All right, let's see. I'm looking what the artificial intelligence of Google News has put up for us here. Here, the China negotiations are going on now today, tomorrow, and the day after, and it's a very crucial moment. Let's see, here we go. This is a CNBC story, actually updated 1 minute ago. Okay, it's fresh off the press. It says here in the synopsis, The diplomatic says China backtracked on nearly all aspects of U.S. trade deal, sources say. A diplomatic cable from Beijing arrived in Washington late on Friday night with systemic edits to a nearly 150-page draft trade agreement that would blow up months of negotiations between the world's two largest economies. The document was riddled with the reversals by China that undermined core U.S. demands, sources told Reuters. U.S. President Donald Trump responded in a tweet on Sunday, viewing to raise tariffs on $200 billion worth of Chinese goods from 10% to 25%. Okay. So that negotiation is going on. I think the Chinese delegation is arriving today, I believe. Lighthizer and U.S. Treasury Secretary Mnuchin were taken aback at the extent of the changes in the draft. Two cabinet officials on Monday told reporters that Chinese backtracking had prompted Trump's tariff under order, but did not provide details on the depth and breadth of the revisions. And Liu, he's the head of the Chinese delegation, last week told Lighthizer, that's the U.S. Trade Representative, and Mnuchin, who's the Secretary of Treasury, that they needed to trust China to fulfill its pledges through administrative and regulatory changes, two of the sources said, but Mnuchin and Lighthizer considered that unacceptable given China's history of failing to fulfill reform pledges. One private sector source briefed on the talks said the last round of negotiations has gone very poorly because China got greedy. China reneged on a dozen things, if not more. The talks were so bad that the real surprise is that it took Trump until Sunday to blow up, the source said. After 20 years of having their way with the U.S., China still appears to be miscalculating with this administration. Yeah. Well, yeah, I think China's been trying to figure Trump out from the very beginning, and I guess they haven't quite done it. But this is not the way to deal with the president or with the United States in general. Maybe if they had Obama in the office, maybe if they had Hillary in the office, maybe then they could have gotten their way here. But not this time. Not this time. Okay, then we have some stories about how Democrats are going to hold Mueller in contempt and so forth. But he was their hero for a while. But now, not so much. All right, let's see what else is on Drudge here. Let's see here. LAPD officers catch MRSA after contact with the homeless. It's a virus, I believe. Iran moving ballistic missiles by boat, USA says. Pompeo warns of imminent threat from Iran. Okay, so war could start there. In the Middle East, and then the U.S. would be in a very difficult position, wouldn't we? Because we have a commitment to protect not only Israel, but also Saudi Arabia. And if we don't protect Saudi Arabia, then there goes the petrodollar. Yeah. Let's see. Let's look at this Pompeo's statement. The danger in the Middle East is not just the possibility that many people will die. It's also the fact that if the petrodollar goes down, then the world economy will be going down. Let's see. Iraq has promised to guarantee the safety of U.S. interests from Iran. U.S. Secretary of State Pompeo said Tuesday as he paid a surprise trip to Baghdad, where he accused Tehran of planning imminent attacks. The U.S. Top diplomat's unannounced visit marked an effort to stand up Washington's ties with Baghdad as it pushes ahead with its maximum pressure against Tehran, a U.S. arch rival but an ally of Iraq. Pompeo abruptly canceled talks in Germany and made a lengthy detour from a European tour to spend 4 hours in Iraq, where he met with President Barham Saleh and Prime Minister Abdel Mahdi. We talked to them about the importance of Iraq ensuring that its ability to adequately protect Americans in their country, Pompeo told reporters after the meeting. All right, so we'll see what's going on with this imminent threat. Yeah. All right, I think that's all that we have time for this morning. We have to do other things today to prepare for the upcoming ceremony. So I'm going to cut it just a bit short today. Thank you very much for joining us this morning, and God bless Godspeed, and may His kingdom come.